This is ERC Sundays, the messages at Emmaus Road Church in DeWitt, Iowa. ERC is a church of people striving to grow in Jesus and make him known to others through our faith, words, and actions. Find out more about our church at emmausroadonline.org. Here's this week's message.
Well, we are now, I think this is week 9 of 12, as we've been, I would say, fairly effectively puddle jumping through the Gospel of John. As Pastor Matt so eloquently stated last week, I would love to have done a word for word study of this book on Sunday mornings, but we would be here for 2 years. And I don't know, it's no offense to anybody in this room, I wonder if we have the ability to stay in one place for that long. If I'm wrong about that, I encourage you, please come up and tell me, Pastor Chris, who do you think I am? We could stay in the same book for 2 years, it's fine. Come tell me that, I would be interested. But anyway, we've come to an awfully important moment in the Gospel of John. To give you some context about where we are in the last week of Jesus' life. Now, if you don't know this, about half or maybe better of John's Gospel is actually all based in the very last week of Jesus' life. And so we get a very small kind of glimpse of that 3-year period of his ministry, and then boom, we're in the very last week. Now, more specifically today, where we are on the eve, so the night before his trial and execution. That's where we are in terms of a timeline. And it's on this night that Jesus is going to do some awfully important things. So just prior to what we're about to read, I'll give you a short list of some of the things that Jesus did. He washed the disciples' feet and instituted a real spirit of servanthood amongst his believers. Not that we would be served, but that we would go and like servants serve. So he instituted communion. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, that matters, right? And so that just happened. He called out the disciple who's going to betray him. So in other words, there's a betrayer in our midst. And so he called him out. He issues his great commandment of love. So Jesus is still teaching and he's still giving commandments, and his commandment is one of great love. He then goes on to tell the disciples that I'm going to die. I'm going to lose my life over this. And then what he does is he tells Peter, hey, by the way, Peter, I know you think we're tight, but you're going to deny me 3 times. So that is the setup, that is the buildup to what we are about to read. Now, I would say with any number of those things that just happened, if we said that emotions were running a little hot in that room and in that space, it would be a substantial understatement. I mean, if you just think through even a couple of those things and what it must have been like to be there, to be one of them, emotions have got to be just absolutely off the charts. And because of that, we see Jesus do what he does best. He consoles and he cares. So he gives this great assurance that even though there's trouble, as Pastor Matt said, don't let your hearts be troubled. And actually, the chapter 14, he bookends basically his thoughts with that. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Now, that's an amazing thing to say amongst everything that's happening and what he already predicted is going to happen. But amongst the things that he says, besides saying, hey, I'm caring for you, I've got your back, he also says, maybe the most important and defining statement in human history. Now, I'll tell you what, I live in this culture. I am more than tired of big clickbait statements. Do you know what I mean by that? It's some big, ridiculously overblown 2 or 3 word title to get you to engage with that content. I'm tired of that stuff. And now I can understand how what I said sounds kind of clickbait-y to draw your attention in. It's not. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being overly dramatic. What Jesus says in these verses, He draws a line in the sand for all of humanity for all times. So it's awfully important. And, well, I won't say any more. With that in mind, why don't we read the text together, and we'll just kind of see what comes out of that, huh? This is the word of the Lord. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, that you will be where I am. And you know the way to where I'm going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? Seems like a logical question. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long and you still don't know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. Here ends the reading of God's word. So I would like to kind of organize our thoughts this morning in a fairly simplistic way. And I battled with this a lot over the week, and here's why. I actually think out of what we just read, there's probably not less than 6 really meaningful sermons. Like, not less than that. So I'll just tell you that in order to bring as much of that important piece to all of us as I can, we're just going to organize it in Jesus' statement, the way, the truth, and the life. So if you're attempting to follow along, that's how we're going to do this. We're just going to listen to his words, the way, the truth, and the life. So, speaking of the way, this is the way. Now, I'm not like a huge Star Wars person, and I think a couple of like the main Star Wars people walked out of the room to do children's church. I think they did. So just if you are a Star Wars person, it's fine. It's fine. But just know that this is the one time I will probably ever reference Star Wars on a Sunday morning, because it's just perfect. So this is this quote, "This is the way." If you don't know, it's based on a show called The Mandalorian. I watched all of 2 episodes. But in those 2 episodes, I did learn, this is the way. And I was like, oh, that's profound. I like that. And so what are we really doing there? Well, that is in relation to embodiment of a philosophy and a way of life. It's an embodiment of an ideology. And so from what I've gathered, and Star Wars fans, you can correct me later, but from what I've gathered, the Mandalorian tribe, for lack of a better word, they have a way. They have a way that things ought to be done, and they do not sway from that. This is the way, right? Now, I'm here to tell you that I think our culture has a way. Have you recognized it, though? I've thought long and hard about it. Now, here's what I would contest. I think in Iowa, where we are, right? Iowa, kind of Midwest. Most of us are probably falling kind of in that very, that kind of middle-class dream, right? And the middle-class dream in the Midwest has a way. I don't know if you've recognized it. Let me share with you the way of our culture. Career, family, home, friends, leisure. Maybe not in that order. Career, family, home, friends, leisure. Now, depending on who you are and what your priorities are, your way, it could actually start with family. Maybe the way for you is, man, I just want to take care of my family. That is priority number one. And then down the line, I have my job. And down the line a little bit further, I have my leisure activities, I have my friends, and I have all those things. And the thing is, we don't always recognize it, but we know when we see somebody living the way. Probably because you dress a certain way, you talk to the quote-unquote right people, you go to the right places, you shop, we know the way when we see it. We understand it. And so when somebody is not living the way, in terms of like the Midwestern middle-class dream, oh man, we're usually kind of like, what are they doing? And we get very suspicious of them because they're not living the way. And you can look at that in a number of different ways, but I'll just leave you to your thoughts. Well, here's the thing. Among the way that we typically live, I don't know that faith always finds its way in. So like I said, we think deeply and we worry and we live for family and our careers and our friends and our leisure activities. Where is faith in our culture's way? Does it exist? Or is it just something we like tack on when it's convenient? Or is it something we tack on because, well, that's still culturally appropriate in the Midwest? The coasts have given up on casual church attendance a long time ago. But in the Midwest, we're still holding strong. Church is still it's just something we still do culturally. And it begs the question, is your faith part of the way you live, or is it just something we tack on? Again, I will leave you to your thoughts on that. But I will tell you, when Jesus says, I am the way, he is working on at least, minimum, two different ideas. First, the way of Christ. Let me get over here for a second. Here is the way of Christ. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added on to you. So we have a way that our culture tells us to live, and then Jesus has a way. Do they coincide? Do you think? I heard somebody say no. Good for you. I don't think they coincide very well, because Jesus' way is seeking God first and foremost above all things. Number one priority. Now, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. If God becomes my number one priority, then that means I'm going to care about his way. And I'm going to work towards living his way, not my way. And what's that going to look like? That's going to look like loving God, loving my neighbor as myself. It's going to drastically change our community if we start living this way, instead of the way that our culture just kind of subtly tells us that we ought to live in order to be happy. It would really change DeWitt. I promise. Well, let me leave that there and let me describe the other way that Jesus is talking about being the way. Jesus is talking about being the way home. So, a little background. My family and I, when we left DeWitt for like 8 years, and during that time went to seminary and worked at various churches throughout Minnesota, North Dakota, whatever. And I can remember vividly. There was one year, we were living in Williston, North Dakota, which is about a 17-hour drive. It's around 1,000 miles. And I happened to have, the other pastor said, you know what, go home. Go be with your family, go home. And it was incredible that he allowed that. Pastors work on Christmas, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But he said, go home. And my heart just like, yes. I'm going home. And so after the 17-hour drive, I will never forget it. We walked into my brother's house where we were going to stay, and it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, so it's dark and everything's just like, but as I walked in there, every bit of my soul all at once felt as though I was fully home. The smell of Christmas, the soft lights, and I was just like, oh, I like melted. It's hard to even describe. But when I walked in that door, home. Not my home, but home, right? Well, it was only a matter of days later that I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm not really home. Because I'm thinking about my job. I'm thinking about friends that we've created in a space 1,000 miles away. And I'm thinking about our life there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not home. So then we go back to Williston, and within a couple days, I don't feel like I'm home. What is the problem? Well, fast forward. You say, Pastor Chris, but you live here now. I do. It's a gift. Love living here. Love living in DeWitt amongst family and friends in the community that I care about so deeply. And yet, if I'm being really honest with you, there's still something missing. Can't quite put my finger on it most days, but there's still something missing. There's still something that says, man, this isn't quite home. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, but I do. I do. And I think that feeling is put there specifically by God because He knows, and He calls us in His Word, He calls us sojourners. He calls us exiles. Do you realize that that's what He calls us in His Word? That we are sojourners? We're just passing through. Therefore, the Bible tells us that we have a real permanent home that fulfills all of those emotional needs and all of those gaps that no matter what kind of house you live in, no matter if you live near your family, you have a great job, none of those things quite fill the gap. It's because we're not really home. And Jesus says, I am the way home. I am the way home. I'm the way to get you to where you really belong. Come through me and go home. And I love the fact that we don't have time to dig into it. That's one of the 6 sermons I was talking about. We don't have time to dig into the fact that He's really preparing this home for us. I got to stop. I got to stop on that. But we're ambassadors. Best case scenario, we get to be ambassadors for the gospel. We get to be ambassadors to tell people that, man, you've got a real home. And Jesus wants to bring you there, and He's the way there, right? That's what it's so important that we get this. And let me say one more thing. Jesus understands this feeling that I can't quite put my finger on. Jesus gets it because He left home. He left home so that you could go home. Do you get that? Do you see how that works? Jesus left a perfect home, came into what I think is a loving home, but is still born in a barn. Not awesome. He left home so that you could go home someday. I hope you take Him up on it. Well, let's keep going. The truth. I'll tell you what. I know that there are certain truth claims that should never be questioned. Gravity. You should not put gravity to the test, especially anything above probably a couple feet. You should not put gravity to the test. That is a truth claim that is really important. You should not, the truth claim that the world is round, that's an important one. I don't know if there's any flat earthers in this room. I'm just going to leave it alone. Never mind. I can't even do it. Here's another truth claim that should never be questioned. Pineapple absolutely belongs on pizza. Matt Schweitzer, we need to have a talk. Okay, sorry. But there are truth claims that are really important that we shouldn't question, right? Now, the interesting thing I think about our culture, and this is important, is that truth, which was once, I think, a very objective idea, Objective meaning cannot be questioned. It is what it is, right? Truth in our culture has become subjective. How do I know that? Well, let's read what one of a gazillion popular articles talks about. You become rooted in yourself. This is how you find fulfillment, by the way. That's the context. You become rooted in yourself. Over time, living this way becomes your default. Great. Remember that moving towards your truth is the natural direction of your psychological evolution. Interesting. I wonder if we take that to its logical conclusion where we'll end up. Oh, that's right. I know where we'll end up. We will end up in a place where everybody does what they want, how they want, when, where they want. Can I just tell you that, like, this idea of your truth, and nobody's allowed to question that, can I say something kind of terrible? I'm going to. Can I tell you that if your truth is a real thing, if truth is not objective but it's subjective to our feelings, then nobody can tell Hitler that he was wrong? Yeah, I know, I said it. Think about it. Think about that. If we get to decide what truth is, who gets to tell anybody who does terrible things that they're wrong? You can't. You can't. And here's the thing. Jesus, I said that he draws a line, and he does. Jesus makes just this ultimate truth claim in what he says. Let me pull that up. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Do you realize what he just did? Do you realize how important this statement is? This statement is completely exclusive. We live in a world that values inclusivity. So in other words, everybody's invited in, everybody's allowed, everybody can be whatever they want to be. Jesus makes an incredibly exclusive statement. And how is it exclusive? He excludes every other possibility to God. Therefore, you cannot simply be a good person and get to God. You cannot volunteer enough and get to God. You cannot give enough money to get to God. List the thing that you think is great. None of those get you to God. Not a single one. And additionally, he's telling us, guess what? Every other faith claim on the planet is a lie. Every other faith claim on the planet is a lie. And it needs to be called out as a lie. A lie that will send people to hell. Think I'm being dramatic? I'm not. It's true. He's making that claim. You cannot access heaven itself without going through Jesus Christ. There is no other way. I don't know how much more clear to make that. But I'm just trying to tell you that if you walked in here today and you thought that somehow your church attendance or anything else under the sun that makes you feel like a good person, if somehow you thought that that is going to justify you and get you to where you want to go beyond this life, you're wrong. Sorry? Not sorry? You're just wrong. And so here's the thing. Jesus, with this particular truth claim, he makes the path to salvation so narrow. We hate people who are narrow. They're small-minded and they're narrow. Well, Jesus made it so narrow. He made it as narrow as one person. So when the Bible talks about the fact that the path to salvation is narrow, it's only as wide as one person can walk. And you know what you need to do in order to walk? You can't go left or right. You have to fall in line directly behind him and walk the narrow road without swaying one way or the other. It is only as wide as Jesus Christ, and it is not an inch wider than that. Period. There are places in the world where what I just said will get you killed. But I think it's worth it. Because it's the truth. It's the objective truth. The life. Let's come to a conclusion here of some sorts. Jesus, in these moments in the upper room, where they're doing communion, and he's going to go off to pray in a little bit. He just got done telling the disciples that he has to die. Now, in the same breath, in the same idea, he's also telling them that he is life itself. That sounds like a remarkable contradiction on the surface. How can you tell me that you are going to die and then also tell me that you are life? How does that work? I'll show you how that works. Well, I'll let Jesus tell you how that works. In John chapter 10, he says, "For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to pick it back up again. This charge I have received from my Father." If he has the authority over life and death itself, which he does, that means he has the authority to bring you back from anything that you think is going to kill you. Don't you see? There is nothing that can be done to us on this earth that can separate us from the love of God that is in Jesus Christ. There is nothing. I heard I can't remember who it was, a pastor. He said he was sick and he was dying. And he said, if you open up the paper tomorrow and you see that I've died, don't believe what you read. Don't believe what you read, because I haven't died. I've just changed addresses. Do you get that? Like, that's incredible. He's right. It is not about a death that swallows us whole and that removes us from this world so that our loved ones are lost and there's no hope. No, it is life that he offers. It is life that he guarantees. And he gives that life because he has lived the way. And he has spoken the truth. And he has died the death that we might live. That's the life. He wants you to have that life. It's available to you. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'd like to invite our praise team up as we kind of close down with maybe one more thought. By the way, if you're wondering, my cup says students' tears. Tasty. Said salty? Man, okay. I don't know how you choose to live your day-to-day life. That's between you and the Lord. But there's a way. There's a way in which God is asking you to do that. That is remarkably life-giving. And it gives so much more freedom than you could ever imagine. And there is a truth that he's calling you in to speak. Now, I understand that speaking that truth, especially in our culture, can be incredibly offensive. I get that. Believe me, I've offended a lot of people. But man, I want the life that he offers. I want it. Because this isn't quite home. It's beautiful. Love you guys. Love this city. But it's not quite home. And I really want the life that he promises. So, I'm going to leave you to think about that.
Thanks for listening to ERC Sundays. To support the work God is doing at Emmaus Road Church, visit emmausroadonline.org/giving.